Hello and welcome friends. In Unit 3, we were in the middle of discussion about media. So which media you are going to make use of, that is what we are going to discuss today. If you remember, in the last session that we have had, we talked about reach, frequency and impact and how they are interrelated. We talked about the trade-off between the reach and frequency, and we took up an example also, right? So let me now talk about the media types. Now, what do we mean by media types? Basically, we have got different types of media. For example, print media is one example. Then we have got the broadcast media, which includes television and radio. So this is what we mean by media type. But how do we decide which particular media type to use for our communication campaign, for our advertising campaign, right? When I am talking about communication campaign, it includes, apart from advertising, sales promotion, personal selling, indirect marketing, as well as public relations. So here we'll be talking specifically about advertising management, though whatever we talk about here, it also applies to the other elements in the communication mix. So basically, what will be the decision considerations? On what basis will you decide which particular kind of media to use? So there are different types of media. I have given you an example of print media, then we've got broadcast media, then we have got outdoor media. The banners or the hoardings that you find on the roadside, they are called outdoor media. The ads that you find on a moving bus, that is an example of transit media, or maybe on a train, or maybe on a metro train. These are examples of transit media. So there are different types of media which are available to you, and you have to pick up one or maybe a few more of them to make your message reach your target audience. So that is what is to be discussed here, that is what is to be talked about here. So how do you decide which particular media type to choose? Should you go for the transit media, or should you go for the broadcast media? Should you go for the outdoor media, or should you go for the print media? Should you go for the electronic media, or should you go for some newsletters? So that decision is taken based on a number of aspects. Number one is target audience media habits. Now what do we mean by this? You are going to use that media which is also being used by the target audience. For example, suppose you want to sell your toothpaste. You have come up with a toothpaste brand, and then you have to decide which particular media type to use. Should I go for outdoor advertising? Should I go for transit advertising or broadcast advertising? Which particular media to use? That will depend on the media habits of your target audience. If your target audience is in the habit of reading newspapers and magazines, you will go for the print media. On the other hand, they are more likely to be watching movies on television, or to be watching soap operas, serials on television. Then you are most likely also to use the broadcast media. If you know that your target audience is predominantly rural, you are selling a particular brand which sells predominantly in rural areas, and your audience is predominantly rural. For example, when you are trying to sell a tractor, or when you are trying to sell pesticides, fertilizers, then naturally your target audience is going to be predominantly rural. Now you have to decide the media type that you are going to use based on the media consumption habits of this target audience. So you do a research and find out that the target audience uses radio to get different types of information. So what will you be doing? You will be advertising your product on the radio, which is an example of a broadcast media. Is this okay? So the first thing that you have to take into consideration while deciding the media type, while picking up one particular media type or maybe a few of these media types, the first thing that you will take into account is what is the media consumption habit of your target market, of your target audience. Again, let us take some examples. As far as the target audience characteristics are concerned, it is not going to be a very good idea to use print media if your target audience comprises of people who are illiterate or who only have functional literacy. So for such target audiences, it is going to be a better idea for you to promote your product through television or radio, because there they don't need to read something out. They will be listening to the ad on the radio or they will be seeing the ad on the television. So it is better for you to use the broadcast media like television and radio. Then another decision that is a very, very important one, another decision consideration that is a very, very important one is the cost per exposure. I hope now you remember from our last sessions that we have had what we mean by exposure. Exposure is that instance when your target audience watches your ad or looks at your ad. That instance is known as exposure. So that is equal to 1 exposure. If the target audience gets exposed to your ad twice in a particular day, we can say that the exposure, total number of exposures were 2. Is that making sense? However, you also have to take into account whether you have to pay a lot of amount or you only have to pay a few rupees to expose your target audience to that particular media. If you take example of television, you would find if you are exposing your audience to your promotional campaign, to your advertising campaign, by releasing your television ads, by releasing your advertisements on television, then naturally you will have to spend a lot of money. A 10-second to 20-second spot during prime time may cost you even more than 1 lakh. It might even cost you 10 lakhs, 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs as well if the program in which you are placing your ads, these programs are very, very popular, and that happens when there is an India-Pakistan match, cricket match going on. So if you want to advertise your product when an India-Pakistan cricket match is going on, you will have to spend a lot more compared to what you would have had to spend on normal days. Is this fine? So cost per exposure is going to be another important criteria. Please understand that if you have a shoestring budget, if you have this constraint, budgetary constraint, you cannot spend too much, it is going to be a better idea for you to go for a radio rather than going for television, because in radios you would find that placing the ad on radios is going to be much less costly. Again, product characteristic is also important when we are selecting a particular media type for our advertising campaign, right? What do we mean by product characteristics? Whether the product needs to be demonstrated, whether the product's working needs to be demonstrated to the users, or the users can simply visualize without actually looking at a demonstration. They can visualize, they can imagine how the product works, or you need to explain how the product works to your users. So depending on that, you will go for different media choices, right? For example, if you want to show how the inner part of a machine works, how the cylinders in your scooty engines work, the inner part, naturally you cannot demonstrate it to them. So then a better idea would be to use TVs, because then what will you do? You will prepare an ad which will be showcasing how the inner parts of the cylinder work in your bike engine. What is the working of the bike engine? that you can showcase on TV, but you cannot showcase it that effectively through outdoor media or through print media. Is that making sense? Again, if you want to show comparison ads, now what do we mean by comparison ads? Comparison ads is basically those ads in which there is a comparison made between your brand, which you are promoting to your target audience, and the other rival brands in the market. So you make a comparison. So these kind of ads are known as comparison ads, right? And when you are making a comparison ad, naturally you are providing a lot of information to your audience. The audience has to understand, comprehend that information, they have to digest it. Then only they might want to switch to your product, they might start getting convinced about your product and they would buy your product only then. So you have to put forth a lot of information for the consumption by your target audience. Naturally, this is simply not possible in a 10-second television commercial, in a 10-second television advertisement. What will you have to do? You will have to go for print media. So in print media you can do this comparison and the audience can go through your ad, copy, and they can keep repeating that particular process till the point of time they are fully aware of how your product is better than the other rival products in the market. So they can go through your ad copy again and again. This is okay, but that is not possible on television media, and that is why whenever you see these kind of comparison ads, and these kind of comparison ads are very, very prominent in technologically sophisticated products like a mobile phone or maybe a bike or a car or maybe a computer system, right? So in such instances you will have to go for print media, right? So therein you will be using print media, and that is what happens. You would watch TV but you would hardly find any ads talking about the attributes of a computer or of a car. But if you look at the newspapers, you might find so many such ads. Then again, another important aspect that you have to bear in your mind is the message characteristic. In a way, I have discussed it already. If the message is information heavy, and when are you going to go for information heavy messages? When you want to bring about a cognitive change in your audience. I hope you remember our discussion on attitude components. Therein we talked about ABC. C actually was the cognitive component, right? So if you want your customer to understand your features, to comprehend your attributes, you are providing a lot of information. These kind of ads are known as information heavy ads. And where would these kind of ads be required? Would they be required in the case of a chocolate when you are trying to sell a chocolate, or would they be required when you are trying to sell a car? They would be required when you are trying to sell a car, because when you buy a car, basically this is a very well thought out decision. You take a lot of time, you compare various brands, so you look for such information because this is a high risk situation. We have discussed this, high involvement purchase. On the other hand, a purchase of a biscuit packet or maybe a chocolate, this is going to be a impulse purchase. Impulse purchase, they are not pre-planned. You buy them on impulse when you go to a retail store. You look at the bottle there and you buy it. You look at the carbonated beverage there and you buy the Coca-Cola or the Pepsi. So these are impulse purchases. Therein we don't require information heavy ads. So information heavy ads would mostly be used in cases of cars, mobiles, when you are trying to sell a house. Because all these places the customer looks for information so that he can make a good comparison and he can come up with the best possible decision. Right? So in such cases you will have to provide information heavy ads, and they are only possible through print media and not through the broadcast media like television and radio. And I've given you the reason. In 10 seconds you would never be able to make the audience understand what you are trying to tell him. So for that you need to use the print media. Again, timeliness is a very, very important aspect. What do we mean by timeliness? Timeliness means today, let's suppose today I decide that I need to place an ad in a media tomorrow. I want people to get to know about this particular aspect within 24 hours, right? For example, let's say I decide that on Saturday I will be giving a discount of 10% and I want my customers to know this. And this is something that I've decided on a Friday. So I've basically got only 24 hours to place my ad in a particular media, right? Is that possible? In case of television, it's not possible. In case of televisions, the media space is booked months in advance. So if there is going to be an India-Pakistan hockey match, let's say in the month of February 2021, the ad spaces would be sold and they would be booked months in advance, 5 months, 6 months in advance. So simply not possible for you to get your ads in these kind of media where the booking takes place months in advance. On the other hand, you can come up with these kind of ads in a newspaper, because in newspaper you can book the ad space at a very short notice. So for example, if I want to publish some ad tomorrow, I don't need to do anything. I need to contact the newspaper people and they will be ready to place my ad. So there is no booking in advance, and that is why in such cases, when you have to provide some information to your target audience in a very prompt fashion, in a very fast manner, then you go for the print ads, specifically the newspapers. On the other hand, if timeliness is not an issue, you don't need to worry about the time, then in that case you can go for television ads. For example, if I am coming up with a launch in the month of March 2021, right? So for me, timeliness is not an issue because I still have 5 to 6 months for my customers to know about this new product launch. So timeliness is not an issue, so I can go for television ads and radio ads also, right? Now with this, we come to the different types of media that we have. Now what I'll be doing is, I will be simply browsing you through the different media types that we have. For example, if you look at the first column, this is the different types of media that we have. Newspapers, magazine. Now what do we mean by print? They're both part of the print media. So you've got newspapers, we've got magazines, then we've got the broadcast media, television and radio. Then we've got the telephone and mobiles, which have gained prominence in the recent decades. Then we have got the snail mail and the email, right? Snail mail used to be the earlier thing, wherein you used to post a letter and then you would go to a post office to post that letter, and then 7 days down the line, 8 days down the line, the letter would reach the intended audience. So that was known as snail mail because it used to take a lot of time. But now we have got this option, email, right? So these are the different types of media that we have. And in the second column, we are talking about the positive aspects of these media types, while in the third column, we are talking about the limitations of these media types, right? So there are other media types also. We have got the internet, we have got the outdoor and the transit media. Now what do we mean by the internet? We have basically talked about the mobiles, we have talked about email, but what we are trying to refer to is that you can also advertise your product through your own website or through a website which is created by some third party, right? So that is what we mean by internet. Fine. Then we've got the outdoor media. Outdoor media means which is put up. Now have a look at this particular building. So the advertisements have been put up on the exterior of the buildings. Now this is an example of an outdoor media. The banner that our department has put up near the degree college gate so that people get to know about BBA, that is again an example of outdoor media. Now what do we mean by the transit media? Transit media, have a look here. OLX is using this space, and since the automobile that has been shown here, the auto rickshaw which has been shown here, it will keep moving from one point to the other. This is known as the transit media. Earlier I gave you example of how you can show your ad on a moving train. So the exterior of the train can be painted in the colors of your brand. So that can be an example of transit media. Likewise, there are ad spaces which are sold by Indian Railways, even Uttarakhand Road Transport Corporation. You might have seen Patanjali ads on the exterior of the Uttarakhand Road Transport Corporation buses. That is an example of transit media, right? Then we have got the brochures and the newsletters. We have got the yellow pages. We'll be talking about them in more detail later on. Then we have got the editorials, and then we've got the infomercials. So these are the different types of media that we have. What will be the issue that we'll be discussing in the next session? We'll be talking about all these media types individually, and then we'll do an analysis of what all advantages do they entail and what all limitations do they have. So that is going to be the agenda in the next session that we will have. As far as the assignments are concerned, I had given you an assignment on 5th of October, if I'm not wrong, and I have not received responses from all the 13 students. So those students who have missed out on this particular assignment, my advice is don't miss out on these kind of assignments, because you might have to lose marks. So thank you very much for your time.